Alrighty, welcome to YouTube's latest and greatest podcast. You're here with me, Michael, and my friend, my colleague, my housemate, Luke. Welcome.
G'day, mate. Thanks for having me. Yeah, welcome to the podcast, guys. We're just going to be covering all the biggest topics in Bitcoin and macro and anything that kind of catches our attention. So I suppose we should start off with probably some of the bigger news that's happening this week in the land of Bitcoin and macroeconomics. And that is probably the collapse of one of China's largest real estate companies, and that is called Evergrande, because that is having a pretty big effect on not only the stock markets, but also the Bitcoin markets. So for anybody who's unaware, Evergrande is probably one of the largest real estate companies in China. Their founder is the third richest person in China. So he's made a fortune off it. Okay. And right now they've got 1.5 million empty homes sitting there in China, and developers and people are pretty pissed because this company's got up to its eyeballs in debt and it can't pay the debt, and all the homes are sitting there empty. So everybody's a little bit annoyed, and the size of Evergrande, they're actually very big. So Lehman Brothers famously triggered the 2008 global financial crisis, and they had $600 billion of assets. And Evergrande, as of Monday, actually had $500 billion worth of assets. So they have a credit freeze. That's a big deal for macro. And that's why stocks are selling off at the moment, which we'll probably check out in a minute if we've got some charts on hand. And that is also having a follow-on effect into the Bitcoin markets and the stock market. So that's probably what's causing a lot of the chaos and mayhem. So I mean, have we got some charts, Mr. Producer over there, of the Evergrande crash? Because I believe it's down, 80% or so? So
yeah, it's down about 90%. You're right. You're here with all the charts. I'm basically just put the charts on the screen, make it all look nice. You can run us through basically how the chart looks. As you say, Evergrande is down 90% in the past from their all-time high, basically in 2017. Everything, as you say, is down for the day. Netflix, Tesla, Apple, CoinSpot, or a lot of the more speculative ETFs in ARK, Dow Jones and Nasdaq, everything is down except basically the volatility index, which
volatility is up because stocks are down, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly.
That is an absolute bloodbath. Have a look at that for a chart. So I think it's definitely just worth touching on, because that is causing a little bit of a crash in the Bitcoin market. And I mean, we've been waiting for kind of the straw to break the camel's back in macro land. We are currently living through the largest Ponzi scheme of all time, ladies and gentlemen. We have global debt, nominal figures above $300 trillion worth of debt worldwide. Okay. That's a global debt to GDP ratio of above 356%. So we've been waiting for something to trigger the conclusion of this long-term debt cycle or the end of this financial system. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on Evergrande, because it could be a canary in the coal mine that our current financial system is about to roll over and implode. And obviously that's why we're Bitcoiners here on the channel. I don't think we've mentioned that yet, but we believe Bitcoin's the solution to this debt Ponzi scheme. So if Evergrande's having issue, one of the largest real estate companies in China, it's worth keeping an eye on, because China holds 15% of that global debt we just talked of. So out of the 300 trillion, China actually holds 15% of it. So it's worth keeping an eye on it. And that's why you're seeing a lot of correlation in the Bitcoin markets at the moment, because in the short term, Bitcoin is still correlated to a lot of the equities, and equities are down. What is it? 5 or 6%, Mr. Fitzgerald? I mean,
yeah, roughly, yeah.
And that's a lot. I mean, it doesn't sound like much in Bitcoin land, 5 or 6%, but when you're talking about the equity market being $90 trillion in size, when that loses 5% overnight, that's $5 trillion exiting the market overnight. So it's a big deal when stocks are down only 5%. So that's the first topic we wanted to cover and show you guys today.
Just while we're on that as well, Luke, what do you reckon Sleepy Joe can do about this? I mean, do you reckon they're going to get the money printer fired up to keep confidence in the stock market?
Yeah, so I noticed that China was putting some money into the repo market last week, the Chinese central bank. But I saw a headline this morning. They came out and they said they weren't going to bail out Evergrande. Evergrande's already lost 93%. So the bonds are already trading at I think it was 12 cents on the dollar this morning. So they've already lost 92% of their value. So it'd be very interesting to see if the People's Bank of China's central bank steps in and buys those bonds for what they were valued last week. It'll be very interesting, but I suppose that's the first topic we've got in store for you guys today. It's just a canary in the coal mine to keep an eye on, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the head there. I think it is the explanation for, the drop in Bitcoin and certainly everything else. That's certainly the catalyst. Moving on, as you wanted to speak about whales are accumulating very heavily. What have we added? 699 Bitcoin in the last two months, basically. So as you can see by the chart here on the screen, it's trending upwards. And what are your comments on the situation there, Luke?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I mean, the price in Bitcoin may be down 15 or 20%, but whales are buying the dip. 180,000 Bitcoin added in 2 months is massive. And a lot of people are saying, hey, this is a bear market. This is our dead cat bounce from that 65K top. We had a 55% correction to 29K. And now a lot of bears are coming out of the woodworks and they're saying, this is just a dead cat bounce. But when you look at the on-chain fundamentals, like we're looking at here, this chart comes from a really good newsletter put together by Will Clementi, who's working at, I think it's Blockware Intelligence newsletter. So that's where the chart comes from. And it shows that whales have been buying the dip. So, I mean, whales don't generally increase their holdings in Bitcoin in a bear market. So that's an indicator that I look at and say, hang on a minute, the on-chain is saying something different to what a lot of these bears are saying when they only focus on the technical analysis. So I think it's bullish. And I think it's not just large whales buying the dip. We've even got nation states buying this dip. So I think that's also something really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. As you say, whales are definitely the drivers of all bull and bear markets, to be quite frank. And that's not just in Bitcoin. People often get confused and say, well, not even necessarily confused, just more like I don't really want to be a market that's controlled by big boys. The reality of the situation is every market in the world is controlled by the big boys. So Bitcoin, with no exception to that, whales are definitely the driver of the pricing of bull markets and bear markets. So it's looking positive, at least in my opinion, moving forward to the end of Q1 next year. In relation to that too, the Bitcoin exchange flows are at a low, as you can see here. So it basically just means the amount of Bitcoin on the exchange. So obviously less Bitcoin on the exchange means less Bitcoin for sale, which means obviously it's less likely to be sold. That obviously drives the price up in turn. As you can see, pretty inversely related. And this chart only goes back for a year, but throughout, it's not even just Bitcoin. Again, it's every asset.
I think it's a good one to bring up because a lot of people when you can see on the chart there on the left-hand side, it shows the price of Bitcoin running up from 10K to 60K, and all during that run up in price last year, that first part of the bull market, everybody was sharing this chart and they were saying, hey, look, the amount of coins on the exchanges is decreasing, okay? Up the very top, you can see the amount of coins on the exchanges in September of last year was 2.64 million, and then it decreased all the way to 2.4 million. So 200,000 coins got scooped off the exchange in that bull market. So that's a really important thing to take a look at. Like you rightly said, if coins aren't on the exchanges, it means people don't want to sell. And right now, the amount of coins on the exchanges is decreasing significantly after we've had a really nice rebound off the 30K level. And it's actually at the lowest level that we've seen in this entire bull market, indicating that coins are going into the strongholders' hands off the exchanges. That's very good to see.
Yeah, definitely. And look who's buying it too. We saw last night, I'll get it up actually. Who's buying it? None other than the people who made it legal tender within the last couple of weeks, El Salvador. So they scooped up themselves up another 150 coins. Let's get Bukele up here.
That's really.
You go.
No, I was just going to say that's really big news, and it's kind of flying under the radar a lot. If we because Bukele loves his tweets, he loves trolling the IMF, and he loves talking Bitcoin on his Twitter. So it's great to say. There you go, you've got the tweet up there.
Yeah,
Bukele's bought 150 new coins 23 hours ago.
It's really crazy. It's super crazy when you actually think about it. Now we've got sovereign states buying the dip. It's quite funny too. Shout out to Bukele as well. He changed his description. He's changed his bio on Twitter. something quite funny. Oh, he's changed it again. He's changed it again. The coolest dictator in the world. It was the dictator of El Salvador, but this has literally been changed in the last hour or so.
He's a Chad.
Yeah, he is. And on that note too, now I did see a stat here that Bukele posted. It was 1.6 El Salvadorians when I find it are now using, here we go, are now using the Chivo wallet. So El Salvador has a population of 6.4 million people. That means 25% of the people in El Salvador are now using it. And what has it been? 2 weeks? I think it's been 2 weeks to the exact day today. So it's rising pretty quickly by the looks of it.
Very, very, very bullish. Very bullish indeed. So that's in the short term. I think all of those short-term factors show that it's pretty bullish for Bitcoin. Yes, the price is dipping and it's off 15%, but it looks to me like it's a pretty good buying opportunity. If you've got whales buying the dip, adding 188,000 coins in the past 2 months, and you've got a president of a goddamn nation state buying the dip. So that's a dip that I'd want to be buying too. And I think having a look at the macro explained why it's occurring. So maybe we want to zoom out a little bit more. And do we have any more charts we wanted to have a look at that maybe zoomed out and put Bitcoin in the bigger picture?
Yeah, to look at the bigger picture, to sort of see where we are in, I suppose, the thesis of what I predict is going to happen, and not financial advice. You do you. If you lose money, it's your fault. But zooming out, I think, there's a couple indicators that have been pretty good at timing tops, or at least indicating tops. One of them being, firstly, the 2-year moving average multiplier. So you can see pretty well by looking here, it does stay within the band for a vast majority of the time. And then when it shoots above the bands, it generally picks a top. When it shoots below the bands, generally picking a bottom or close to a bottom. So closer to, or earlier this year, about 6 months ago, you can see we got pretty close there to the top band, but didn't quite crack it. So I think we've still got a bit of leg up in this bull run, at least if history is anything to repeat. If history is to repeat itself. Just looking at another one too, one that I think is quite important is NUPL, net unrealized profit loss. So again, you can see history does predict it quite well. It is one of those questions I do ask myself, is when people know these models, when people know the models, they tend to get broken. So it is one of these things you've got to ask yourself, is the model broken? Do enough people know about it? But just as I say, if history is anything to go by, we haven't hit the top on 2 of these very important indicators, being the 2-year moving average, and also the net unrealized profit loss, NUPL. I love saying that word, NUPL.
It is an interesting word, but I tend to agree. I mean, it's a lot of people calling it top, but if you have a look at the Maya multiple, it doesn't look anything close to a top to me. And I don't think Bitcoin's going to just have a normal top this year and top out at 200,000 or 300,000. I think we actually do break all of these models this cycle, because I think all of the largest banks around the world are now talking about these models and talking about stock to flow and talking about front running the halving cycles. So I think it's all very interesting. But I personally think trying to time a top this bull run is going to be interesting, because as Max Kaiser says, Bitcoin doesn't have any tops because fiat has no bottom. So I think the more you watch fiat kind of depreciate itself at 20 to 30% a year, I think the significance of Bitcoin cycles kind of blends away a little bit.
I'm going to have to give you a shout out here. I will give you credit where credit's due, as much as I hate giving you credit. You were the first person who did predict, at least the first person I heard who predicted the double bubble theory. This was, I first heard it off you at the start of the year, before even Bitcoin, probably around the 20,000 mark where Bitcoin was. So far looking good. We've had our first bubble, similar to the 2013 bubble we're looking at, where there was 2 peaks. So you can see back here, 2013, there's your first peak, comes back in, goes for a second peak. And then also, as you see on NUPL here, the double bubble in 2013. Credit where credit's due.
That caught me off guard, mate. I don't normally get credit from yourself. I'll take that one. Fucking hell, I'll take that one. It doesn't feel like a normal cycle to me. Everything happened a lot too quickly. It's just, I mean, it feels like a super cycle. That's just my opinion on it. And that is financial advice from myself. Buy Bitcoin like you should be, like it's going out of fashion. Everybody's going to need some Bitcoin, and owning zero is probably the riskiest financial decision of the 2020s, in my opinion.
Well, I'll make sure to get my lawyers onto you if that doesn't happen. So,
Not financial advice. It says it in the description, ladies and gentlemen. You can't sue me. Um, what else did you have in store for us, brother?
um, look, in terms of all the Bitcoin stuff and macro, I think that's kind of summed it up, at least for the next couple of days. One thing I did want to point out, though, was, COVID has essentially put a lot of people in precarious positions, and we're seeing a lot of the backlash of that. A lot of the backlash of that. As we can see here, there's been yesterday, the protesters in Melbourne at the CFMEU, this construction union, basically. If we watch some of the footage here, did get quite violent. But when I say quite violent, there's certainly violence involved. I do want to show you a clip after of what the union boss said. It's quite funny. It's certainly not going to help the situation at all. So as you can see here, this is speculation. I've heard from reliable sources that the people who were protecting the CFMEU there are bikies. Don't know if it's true, so that's unverified. But you can see here, or later on at least, the police get called in. And I know it's happening right now, actually. They're back there today, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Oh, sorry, it doesn't look like it's going to finish anytime soon. So there's that happening, and here is a piece from there he is, none other than John Setka himself.
There you go. Just another example of people pushing back and having been an absolute gutful of government mandated medicines. I'll leave it there and I won't go into the details, but it's bad enough that you steal for inflation 20% a year, the silent tax, as they call it, the taxation without representation. But when you start kicking people out of their jobs, they've had a gutful and they're pushing back. So I personally love to see it. I definitely don't encourage any of that behavior because that would get me into trouble here on YouTube. But it is good to see people saying, I've had a gutful, I've had enough. I'm opting out of this corrupt system, because that all ties into Bitcoin being the solution and being the opportunity for mankind for the first time in human history to separate money from state. So a revolution was always due to come, and here it is. And this is just kind of a consequence of it. It's just one part of the revolution. So
yeah, you nailed it there. I think it really is a consequence. You can't just, essentially say no jab, no job. Essentially what they're saying, as John Setka said, these people allegedly, according to him, are neo-Nazis and troublemakers and all this bullshit. But apparently that's 2021. Wanting to have choice over your body and also put food on the table makes you a neo-Nazi and a troublemaker these days. Crazy world we live in. Alrighty, guys, that's the wrap for the week. So thanks for watching. That's the wrap in Bitcoin, macro, geopolitics, whatever you want to call it. We're looking forward to doing many more of these. We're not quite sure where we want to take the channel. Leave a comment. Let us know what you want to see. So whether that's more macro, more Bitcoin, whether you like the on-chain specifically, whatever it is, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you next time. Thanks very much, Luke.
see you guys. Thanks for having me on. That was a blast. Have a good one.